Hello, Troy A, Shadow Wingtronics, back again for the Soundoff challenge. So before I get into the main topic, I want to build a little bit on on what we were talking about last time. And excuse me. And I found something else pretty interesting while doing yesterday's Jake and Leon comic. One of the things that I don't remember if I talked about this or not, but if you take, when I do my comic strips, I usually make a folder for each character within a frame. I make the frame like I did with the coloring, and each character is its own frame, so that it's in its own folder within the frame, so that I can move it around. Now this includes the line art and the coloring, and then any shading or highlighting that I end up doing. So, just as an experiment while I was working on the comic, I took a portion of the picture, and I selected like the character's head, and tried to move it around a bit. Now, when I say that, I mean that I tried to move the line art and the coloring. So instead of just moving the line art around, then having to do the same thing with the coloring, or having to redo the coloring, I was able to move the head and the color underneath the head and move it around and leave the body in place. And this is an experiment. So folders has some really good uses within Clip Studio Paint. And then now we get into the topic we're talking about now. While making said comic, which is a comic with Mario and Luigi, I was hoping to go to there's this website called Drago Art, which is a good place to figure out how to draw things. I used it when I was doing a series of Adventure Time parodies a few years ago. And it's a great site for that. And I was going to use that to help me learn to draw Mario and Luigi for this sketch. But, or for this comic, for the strip. The problem is, by the time I got ready to work on the strip itself, I was on a bit of a crunch, and I didn't really get to do that. So what I ended up doing was taking some official Nintendo art that I was using as a guide, and instead just made it my roughs. Now, when the final piece, I had to change facial expressions and change arm positions. Probably should have done a little more with the body in one panel, Mario's body in one panel, in the third panel, but for the most part, it came out okay. Now, I didn't straight up trace it because, like I said, I needed to deal with the different facial expressions and arm poses, but I try to draw it not quite exact, something a little closer to what I would do it, but still, it's like half traced. It's like half a Greg Land, because I actually did more than just trace it. I actually, sorry, I should have blown my nose before I started. I actually took the time to create, to do something different with the pose and with the characters. So it's not a straight up trace. Like I said, it's a partial trace. And it was a cheat that I needed to do in order to get the strip done on time. And these are the kind of things that usually, look down upon. Like, the most you can get is maybe saying, well, tracing is good for practice, but for doing actual art, you should do it by hand. And the weird thing is, many years ago, a number of years ago, I did made my own Super Mario Brothers poster with Mario and Luigi standing on the bodies of the various Koopa forces that they just beat the snot out of. And it was a fun piece to draw. So I figured I wouldn't have too much trouble drawing them, and I did. Now, I also have pictures of the Jake and Leon set and the art room where Jake and Max do their comic work. But and I want to draw a few more sets, but I usually mostly use those for reference. I'll try and draw it by hand. Now I mostly use it for color reference or to remind me what the desks are supposed to look like. Because for some reason, when it came to Jake and Max's art desks, I kept drawing differently each comic I used it in. I don't know why. So I made a dedicated set, but I only use it as a reference. But if I was pressed for time, I could technically use these as actual backdrop, and I've actually used these pieces every now and then as the background. Mostly because with the Jake and Leon set, I wanted to actually have the set behind them, so it was just easier to do it that way. I also have this one background that I created with a with a pattern and everything that I'll use sometimes if I don't use the set. And I don't really mind it too much because it is just a weekly comic strip that I try to find time to do. It's not quite the same as doing it in a regular comic, but even then, if it fits your art style, if you can make it work, and nobody can tell, I don't see too much of a problem with it, with minor cheats, if you're in a deadline and if you can cover it up well enough. I mentioned Greg Land. His problem is always that he uses something for reference, but he doesn't do anything to change it. So often the characters, his characters, are making these weird expressions because that's the pictures that he used. And some of them are even not public domain pictures. So he just straight up traced actual photos rather than taking the time to use that as a guide, but still drawing in a kind of art style. And the weird thing is, I have some comics before he started really doing that, and he's not that bad an artist. So, like, I'm not that great an artist, so I kind of need cheats more than he does. But he can be a fairly decent artist, but for some reason he keeps using all these cheats, and his art looks bad. So it's not a question of should you cheat or should you not cheat. It's, can you do something with it? Are you reliant totally on the cheat to do your comic? Unless you're doing something like those dinosaur comics, or because even a sprite comic puts more effort into, has to put a lot of effort into it, using backgrounds, creating original backgrounds when needed, creating original sprites, creating original characters. So, I mean, a cheat is fine if you can work it in, if you can make it look good. It's not something maybe you should do on a regular basis, but if you need to, I don't think it's necessarily a problem that you do it if you do it right, if you can make it work, if you make it blend. If you can't, then you shouldn't. And really, there is something a lot to be said for trying to draw it yourself. And I hopefully, if I ever do another skit with Mario and Luigi, I will actually try to draw them straight out and use an art guide to show me how to properly draw them, or just try and draw them in one of my other styles and hope I can get it to work. But we'll see what happens with that. So if you want to see the comic, I'm sure at some point I put a link over there in the cards. If so, check it out and check out the rest of my stuff at bwspotlight.com, and the rest of my thoughts on the art of storytelling, including comics and other media. And if you want to see what the other art Soundoff contributions are about this year, you can go to Twitter and look for the Art Soundoff hashtag. Rod Stenzinger is talking about UX design and other kinds of game design stuff, and how that can be related to comic art or just in the game design and UX design in particular, in general. And Jersey Drills is making his own audiobook about starting a comic teaching, what do you call it, lesson plan or whatever it's called. But they're very interesting, and hopefully we'll get some more contributors. And if you want to be one of those contributors, you can join us at artsoundoff.com. Until then, I wish you all happy creating.